Each atheist, they worship. An agnostic, they worship. Because no one, no human being can live without an identity. And the way we explain identity is, you have something you live for. So what do they live for? What is their passion in life? That's their God. And actually you can explain all their actions based on that passion. So, and something that clarifies the importance of identity, and that the mission we choose for our lives is the reality of our identity, is an example I gave also previously. When a person, for example, falls in love with a woman, he has a girlfriend, and she becomes his God. Everything in his life is just about this woman. If she leaves him, what happens? His passion in life disappeared. His ultimate goal disappeared. You can't live like that. There's emptiness. So what do? If your identity disappears, do you know what you do? You disappear. So they kill themselves. Let me try. Okay.
But is that the way Allah gives you value? Like how much worship do you do? How you or is that like you give a value for yourself? How do you know how
the Prophet ﷺ answered your question. He said, لا فضل لعربي على أعجمي إلا بالتقوى. There's no merit for an Arab over a non-Arab, or a non-Arab over an Arab, except through taqwa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assesses us through what? Through that thing. Through worship.
how would I give myself a value?
You don't need to. You just need to work hard. That's your job. That's your function. You see, by the way, that's a common thing among Muslims. We tend to be judgmental even of ourselves. This is why people ask, what will happen if I do this thing? And some people come with this kind of, weird questions, and they just want to find answers out of curiosity. But these questions are out of function because they don't have any practical side to them. So it doesn't make any difference in your life whether you know them or you don't know them. They're the type of argumentative questions. So we shouldn't be, and this is why the scholars say, and this is something I quoted during the conference, they said, السعيد من انشغل بما أراد الله منه لا من انشغل بما أراد الله به. The person who will be successful in the sight of Allah is the one who keeps himself busy with what Allah wants from him. What did Allah told you to do? What did Allah tell you to do? Not the one who keeps himself busy with what Allah is going to do with him. So how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala judges us, that's Allah's business. He does that. You shouldn't get into that. All you have to do is do your best, make sure you're tapping your full potential to make it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and don't worry, Allah is the just, Allah is the merciful, you don't have to worry about that. The happy or the successful. Sa'id in Arabic doesn't exactly mean happy. You see, that's the language thing is, again. Arabs today interpret Sa'id as the happy one. It has that element, but it has much more. Yes. Okay. No problem, anyone. Okay.
No, you can ask.
Do you read Arabic? Can you read Arabic? To be honest, I never got into Islamic psychology, and I'm afraid of that because I know there are many Muslims who study psychology. They study NLP, which is something I talked about as well. They study, and then there's no harm in benefiting from that. These are experimental sciences. If there's a benefit in it, you get it, no problem. But some, especially in the Arab world, some people in the field of da'wah, they take NLP, some psychology, and coaching, and they say, this is Islam. If you disagree with them about anything that is disputable anyway, they develop a stance against you. They have an attitude. Why? Because they have confused Islam for these things. That's a serious pitfall. So this is why I'm very apprehensive about getting into what is called Islamic psychology, things like that. I believe it shouldn't be even, there's nothing, well, that's a personal preference. I don't prefer something to be called Islamic psychology because Islam itself is a way of life. And if a way of life, it has to deal with your behavior, with your psychology. Islam, as I said, is compatible with our makeup. Not only physical makeup, but what I called yesterday the architecture of our souls. It's totally compatible. So it definitely tells us about our psychology, about our behavior, about our emotions, about our intentions, about our feelings, everything. It tells us about all of that's part of Islam. So once we say Islamic psychology, it seems as if it's a psychology, but it has an Islamic taste. That's the problem I have with it. But you know, the books of Muslim scholars, especially Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Al-Qayyim, and even Imam Al-Ghazali with some reservations on what he writes. These are the types of arguments they present as Islamic sciences. These are original Islamic sciences. But it's the gap that we have created that has distanced us from the true understanding of Islam. Okay? The brother behind you, then I'll get back to you. No, what I suggested is that that's a common assumption among some people, that if you want to be practicing, that's the stereotype they have for you, which is not true. Yeah. That's a very good question, mashallah. The stranger, the Prophet ﷺ is talking about a time of total feeling of being truly strange. Obviously there are degrees. But being a stranger does not mean that you cannot relate to the society. You feel that estrangement in your heart because you realize that people are not living according to the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You recognize that feeling and it hurts you. But still, because out of your love for Allah, you realize people's shortcomings, you realize people's need, so you still adjust yourself. And this is an aspect, I hope that I will be able to get to it today. That's the last chance I have. That Islam does give you a level of flexibility without compromising any of your principles. Actually, you can deal with different situations, maintaining your principles, maintaining your heart and your core, but you still be highly flexible. This is what Islam actually teaches us. This is why the Prophet ﷺ said, الْمُؤْمِنُ الَّذِي يُخَالِطُ النَّاسَ وَيَصْبِرُ عَلَىٰ أَذَاهُمْ خَيْرٌ مِّنَ الْمُؤْمِنِ الَّذِي لَا يُخَالِطُ النَّاسَ وَلَا يَصْبِرُ عَلَىٰ أَذَاهُمْ. The believer who mixes with people and is patient with the harm he receives from them. The harm the Muslim usually receives is something that relates to the deen, by the way. The pain he feels because people are not in the same boat is better than the Muslim who does not mix with the people and put up with the harm he receives from them. So we can always reconcile these. So there's no problem, but the feeling is in the heart, but it doesn't cause any alienation from people. It causes that you feel that pain because you feel pity for the people and you wish to see the religion or the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being implemented and respected. Tafadhal.
People's simple belief or their motivation has an impact on their emotions. The Muslim, they drink alcohol, they know that it's wrong. We say there's an idol worshiper who believes that worshiping idols is correct. After they worship the idols, they don't feel any guilt. How do you reconcile that with the fitra that the human being has?
That's it. Jazakallah khair. This fitra, and this brings me to the hadith of Hudhayfa, which I quoted yesterday. And I believe, yesterday I talked about this in detail, but I will repeat it inshallah. I'll keep it short though. Hudhayfa says that the Prophet ﷺ says, إن الأمانة نزلت في جذر قلوب الرجال ثم علموا من القرآن ثم علموا من السنة. The amana, which is the fitrah, which is the seed of the deen of Islam, was sent or planted deep into the root of the heart of every human being. Then they came to know from the Quran, then they came to know from the Sunnah. Now the scholars who explain this hadith, they say the fitrah, which is the amana, is like a seed. It's placed deep in the heart. And this seed, in order to grow, it has the tentative ability and inclination to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at a basic level. But in order for it to survive and grow, it needs water and nutrition. The water and nutrition it needs is the Quran and the Sunnah. So if you deprive it for quite a long time, and you give it with, or you feed it intoxicants or poisons, it eventually dies. So some people reach the stage where the fitrah dies and they don't feel anything when it comes to sin. On the contrary, they only feel, or they develop bad feelings or negative feelings when they hear about Tawheed. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about him. He says in the Quran, وَإِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَحْدَهُ اشْمَأَزَّتْ قُلُوبُ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْآخِرَةِ. And if Allah is mentioned alone, in terms of worship and dedication, then the hearts of the disbelievers feel disgust and hatred at the name of Allah. You see? So these people reach the stage where the fitrah is dead. Let me get Abu Shahada. Yes, okay. You're trying to get me in some kind of mayhem. I'm trying to keep it basic. Basically what happens with zina, let me put it in the simplest form. I won't talk about how Iman leaves him, because Imam Ibn Taymiyyah in his book Al-Iman, and I believe it's been translated. Has it been translated? Kitab Al-Iman by Ibn Taymiyyah, which is very important but very difficult though. Very difficult. And I have a problem with translating this type of Arabic language, because the translators, they carry with them the misconceptions they have in the Arabic language, translate them into English, and here you get a new whole audience getting the wrong impression. Ibn Taymiyyah says regarding this hadith that when the person commits zina, his iman leaves him. And in another narration that it is like a cloud above, rests as a cloud above his head until he repents or leaves that action, then it goes back into his heart. He says this is al-iman, this is the perfection of iman. But the iman, the basic level of iman is still in his heart. Because once iman goes totally out of the heart, the person becomes kafir. But we know the person who commits zina is not kafir. He's a sinner. So what actually leaves him is the perfect state of iman. But the basic iman that keeps him within the realm of Islam is still in his heart. And that was the pitfall the Khawarij fell into. Okay, because they thought that zina means iman is totally out of the heart. That's it, he's out of Islam. Go ahead. Jazakallah khair. That's a very brilliant question. Jazakallah khair for asking that. Okay. Yes. Jazakallah khair. MashaAllah. Very intelligent question. By the way, there was a brother that during the conference I promised him to give a gift. Is he around? I told him to come back to me, but I've never seen him since. I will repeat the question. I will repeat it. Yes. Inshallah. The brother asked the question. He said, you said that any tension between what we have in our hearts, the impression or the belief we have in our hearts, and the external world causes you to change either one. You either tend to change the external world or you change what's inside you. And the brother says that you said at the time of hardship, okay, the trials that Allah sends to the believers, okay, they are meant to strengthen them. But, when hardship comes, it means, do we have to change negatively what's in our hearts? Is that your question somehow? Or did I get it wrong? Okay, I will show you how. Actually, hardships, and that's the beauty of faith and iman. Without experimentation, we get a basic knowledge of things. Once you experiment things, you get a deeper knowledge. This is what hardships does. When hardship comes to you, if a person has weak iman, they interpret this hardship the wrong way. So they think this hardship is targeted against them. This is why they say, why does Allah do this to me? Some people entertain the thought, but obviously they don't say it. They say Allah schemes against me. Some people think like that, even in a subtle way. Sometimes, I tell you how we entertain this thought. Because you say, no matter what project I get into, it is doomed to fail. That's a wrong notion about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It seems that there is someone who keeps pushing you to failure. And who runs the world? It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who's chasing you all the time? No one's chasing you all the time. So obviously it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who controls everything. So many people complain, they say, whatever I say, or whatever I do, it ends up as a failure. They're complaining. You should complain about yourself. There's a subtle notion there that as if Allah is causing the world to act against you. So be careful about what you say. It doesn't have to be the case with everyone who says this, but I'm just saying it's likely to be the case. Now when a person's iman is weak, anything that happens against them, the impression they have that, I am a believer and Allah is the Lord of the world, so why, things should be easier for me, because I'm doing righteous deeds, the whole dunya should support me, and things should be easy for me, and things like that. Okay? This person is definitely, if he keeps doing that, his iman is going to be weak, and he could actually end up even outside of Islam. But the beauty of trials when they come to the Muslim, a first impression seems to be against iman. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah says in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُدَافِعُ عَنِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Allah actually defends the people of faith. He goes through a trial, it's hardship. And he goes through so much hard time. A first impression is that, where is the help of Allah? But Allah says that He defends the believers. If he remains on this thought, it's going to affect his belief and his trust in Allah. So the internal world will change. But what do trials actually do to the true believers? They always have husnul dhan in Allah. So they always work their way through this trial to find what is the wisdom of Allah. Allah must want good for me even if things seem to be hard. My mission is to find out what is the wisdom of Allah here. What did Allah put for me in this? What is in this trial for me? That's what the believer does. So any calamity that comes to him makes full sense and brings him closer to Allah, even increases his love for Allah. This is why Umar ibn Khattab says, Wallahi, it doesn't make any difference to me whether Allah tries me with ease or with hardship. If it's ease, I am thankful. And if it's hardship, I'm patient. And all of them bring me closer to Allah. Did it answer your question? Actually, it doesn't. The trials with the people with weak belief, it could affect their iman, truly. But trials with the true believers, they see through them. So actually, they know there's a total compatibility between the heart and what's happening outside. Because the trials are blessings, as I said in the khutbah, are blessings in disguise. The Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَقْضِي لِعَبْدِهِ الْمُؤْمِنِ قَضَاءً إِلَّا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not pass a judgment or decree. Allah does not permit anything to happen to the believer except that it is good for him. So that's the belief. So actually these trials reinforce the true belief in the heart. Yes, go ahead. I should be asking you. Jazakallah khair.
I would love to show you some of our techniques we use for this one.
Please.
But I want to ask you, many times what we find is that with most people, the iman is actually very low. And the consciousness of Allah, they forget Allah. Really, that's the essence of it. They forget Allah, and then we'll try to do that back. And some people are coming to make issue with me, say, no brother, you have to talk about Quran and Sunnah, and you have to really be hammering them. But that doesn't work. And what we do is we talk to them about really appreciating themselves as human beings first, and then recognize the responsibility and the duty, and then coming out to take it on higher level, and then bring them back to the masjid and come back to what's correct.
Definitely.
So is there another way that we share? Are we missing something of what we're doing?
No, that's totally compatible. As I said, whatever Allah put in us, it serves a purpose. Now what people actually do, I don't know if I will have the time to do this. I explained that before. I called it the hierarchy of goals. Do you still remember that? The way you align your motivations. Because somebody might say, but when it comes to survival, physical survival, this is something Allah put in me. So am I supposed to throw it away? You're not supposed to throw it away. You're just supposed to put it in its right slots. That's what it means. When people go wrong with survival, they place it at the root of their hearts, in the place that is designed for love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is when they go wrong. Sexual desire is a legitimate and positive desire. Because without it, there would be no human beings today. Allah doesn't give you something to destroy you. Allah gives you something to make life easy, to make it better. But it's we who use it the wrong way. That's it. So even the sexual desire is instilled in you. in order for you to place it in the right slot, that it helps you fulfill the purpose for your creation, that we regenerate and we bring about progeny that would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you keep that desire totally away from love of Allah, it could actually become your own God. So there are some people who live for this desire. There are some people who can only think by means of this desire. Any human being or any woman they see in the street, to them is a potential partner in some way or another. Some people just do that. You know, in India, I'm not sure if Indians can recall this, people from India, I read that. They have a proverb that says, because their priests used to take a lot of money from people. People always give them donations of money, they keep them for themselves. So they say a pickpocket sees a priest, all pockets. That's his function, you see, because he defined himself around, stealing money. So this is what a priest means to him. For a righteous Buddhist or Hindu, when he sees a priest, he's a means to enhance his religion. You see, differently. So these desires, like sexual desire, survival, food, socialization, these are all positive, but they are supposed to be put in the right slots, following from our love of Allah. So they serve the purpose of worship ultimately. But you still get the benefit of exercising your physical motivation of sexual desire. There's self-satisfaction in that. Islam accommodates this, as long as you put it in the right slot. Where do people go wrong? People go wrong when they place them in the place, or in the spot that is supposed to be at the root of the heart for belief and for love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now there is something very important. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us responsible at the time of our birth? Responsible to love Him. A child, if he commits a sin, he's not responsible. Why? Okay, but Allah made it that way. Allah made his faculty of understanding still needs to become mature. Why? Why didn't Allah just prepare us to worship Him right from the time of our birth? Why? No, I mean, just imagine, as you reach the age of puberty, you're responsible. Why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just create us straight into this state, instead of going through childhood? Why didn't Allah just put us at this stage, we have full faculty, and we are fully responsible? Jazakallah, very close. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us, because we live in a physical world, Allah wants us to build this physical aspect of our lives. So this is why these desires are very basic, and as long as we live in this physical world, this material world, we have to take care of these desires. We cannot neglect them. So those the hermits, those mystics, who keep away from everybody, and they don't marry, and they fast for most of the time. What did the Prophet ﷺ say about these people who intended to do that? He said, whoever leaves my sunnah is not from me. So there's nothing like that in Islam, I don't marry women. There's nothing like that. That's a desire you have to fulfill, because you live in a material world. You don't live far from reality. So Jazakallah khair, Imam Ibrahim. Yes, just one second. These desires are healthy as long as you put them in the right place. And if you do not satisfy them, they have the ability to grow into monsters. So they devour your original mission. They could devour the original mission. So if you deprive yourself of sexual desire for some time, actually it's possible that you will come with this overwhelming desire that will throw your whole system out of balance. This is why the Prophet ﷺ as well, and it's reported from Umar ibn Khattab, I'm not sure if it's authentic from the Prophet, but it's authentic from Umar ibn Khattab, when he said, Al-Faqr al-Kufr. Poverty is kufr, is disbelief. Because faqr leads to disbelief. Because once you don't have your basic needs satisfied, they devour your heart. So they actually become your basic desires. So you start to operate from them, forgetting about the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we cannot, by the way, give people correct da'wah. We cannot give people correct guidance and help them become receptive unless we satisfy these basic desires. So we put them on the side, we throw them out of the equation as long as they are satisfied, and now we get to the heart of the matter, which is belief in Allah. Does that go with what you have? No? Jazakallah khair. Barakallah feek. Yes. Yes. صح. صحيح. صحيح. Trials. Definitely. Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair. I'm not, by the way, handwriting to me in English is like manuscripts in Arabic. I have some problems with them. Can anyone read that for me? It's very clear, but I have a problem with reading handwriting.
Assalamu alaikum, ya Sheikh. Why must sisters ask questions only on paper when in a gathering where there are also many men present? Why is the woman's voice not to be heard when asking questions to the Sheikh in a gathering for the sake of Allah? What is the evidence for this?
Okay, that would throw me out of balance. Okay. The women used to ask the Prophet ﷺ, and then we have to understand, there's a huge difference between the basic ruling in Islam and different circumstances to apply it. And this is where the role of the scholars comes into play. When it comes to this setup, okay, I don't have any choice about it, but I do prefer it, though. I do prefer it. Now, why do the sisters don't have the privilege to ask the questions? The Prophet ﷺ used to give some time to the sisters, and I would recommend that the local shuyukh, whenever they have time, they can allocate some time for the sisters. And I would prefer, for the sake of avoiding fitna, because we human beings, we are human beings. The Prophet ﷺ said that I did not leave for men a fitna that is stronger than women. So that's a constant temptation. Now sometimes it could be our weakness that leads us, the weakness of men that leads us to keep the sisters aside. That's a possible reason. But I would recommend that if the local imams can give enough time to the sisters and allow that. The reason why I am unable to give, like here, I won't prefer the sisters to raise their voice, because Islam encourages generally women to keep away from men. Aisha radiyallahu anha, the faqihah, the most knowledgeable among the most knowledgeable of the companions, she says, خير للمرأة ألا ترى الرجال ولا يراها الرجال. It is best for women not to see men and not for men to see them, apart from obviously the family and the husband. So in Islam, we shouldn't try to liken Islam to the dominant culture that is here today. Okay? So whatever the situation is, basically it is preferred, especially at times of fitna. Now the hearts are weak. The hearts are weak, and I've heard some stories that really could turn your hair white at a young age. Especially from some brothers in the States, in the United States. I heard some stories, people who do work for da'wah, and some of the objections were, why do you keep the sisters separate, why don't you listen to their voice? And then actually, some sisters could ask this in good faith, I agree. But actually sometimes it leads to working together, free mixing. And wallahi brothers, I've been told by people who've witnessed these things, some of the shuyukh and some of the dua there, that there is a lot of zina taking place between people who do Islamic da'wah. So it's better to be safe rather than sorry. Okay? But do I say that women don't have the right to ask their questions loud? I can't say it's haram. I just can't say it's haram. But I don't see it appropriate according to my, at least, probably it could be my culture. It could be my culture. But if you have any reservations, inshallah. Okay, there's a boy, he's 13 years old, Ismu Walid. His name is Walid. Walid, his mother is asking about him. She wants him back. Okay, Walid, 13 years old. Okay. So I can't say that hearing a woman's voice is haram, But I just don't see it happening here. I don't see it as appropriate if sisters start, asking questions from over the partition. I just don't see it fit. Okay? So you can still, inshallah, but anyway, the point is to get the questions answered. So if you ask your question, inshallah, in written format, inshallah, we'll get it answered. Okay, go ahead. Salam. Okay.
I just wanted to understand, how do we fit people with the mental illness into this equation?
Honestly, I have no clue. I admit, I have no clue. Honestly, I have no clue. Yeah. I think it could be a tentative kind of answer. Their problem, what we are dealing with, is not mental. Although psychologists tend to call that neuropsychology, but I don't think so. What we are dealing with is something in the heart. The brain has some mental processes, and I think this is where these people with mental illnesses have problem. Okay, by the way, the heart is not only a pump for blood. Heart transplant cases now reveal, and you can check that on the internet. They have some amazing stories. And I'll share with you a couple, just for the sake of clarifying this issue. Just to understand that, because the Quran clarifies that it's the heart's job to comprehend and understand. There was a little child, 3 years old. He had some heart failure. And there was another child who fell from a height and died, the same age. So they gave the heart of that person to the other one. Let's call him, for example, John. Now this John, his family does not even know the family of the donors. They've never met them before at all. His mother says after he could walk and his health actually became better. They said they went to the church for service or something like that. She said, we walked into, and my son is by nature very shy. He always holds on to my leg or whatever. He holds on to me, he doesn't leave me. She said, he was still the same. We walked into the church, he was still the same, until he saw that man sitting in the middle of the crowd. He rushes to him and he says, Daddy, 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 and he jumps on his lap and he starts kissing him. She said, I was just baffled, puzzled. What's going on? And this is documented, by the way, this story. She says, they found out that this is the father of the donor. Another story was about a man, a policeman who was shot in the face by a drug dealer. And a university professor received his heart. The wife of the professor says, no, I don't know what's going on with my husband. He's a different person. His eyes are different. He looks physically the same, but when I look into his eyes, he's a different person. He keeps seeing that dream even when he's awake. He sees Jesus, which is the likeness that is known about Jesus, and whatever the actor is or the image is, and then a burning feeling in his face that he cannot put up with. And she says to the interviewer, this is the first time I express this, and I complain about it. The investigator goes to the donor's, who was a policeman, to the donor's wife. He asks her about what happened. She says, my husband died in a very painful way. He was chasing this drug dealer who managed to hide from him, and then he actually took him by surprise and pointed the gun on his face. And he shot him in the face. He asked her, did they get hold of him? She said the police are still trying to get hold of him, but witnesses, they gave his description. He asked about it. Obviously the families don't know each other, these two families. He asked her, how does he look like? She says, he looks exactly like Jesus, the image of Jesus. So the heart has something. And there are other cases that it would take long to talk about them, that deal with sexual orientation. There was a man who was sexually, his wife describes him as in the past, he was sexually very mild. That he never gave her rights, and she never enjoyed their sexual life. He received the heart of a woman who died, but she was, she was pervert, basically. She was a lesbian or whatever. His wife says, after he received this heart, he became so passionate about the sexual life. These are stories you can check and find out on the internet. They're available on the web. Within the heart. That's a new finding, and they're still working on it, true. But to me, it doesn't make any difference. To me, it doesn't make any difference. Allah tells us so about the heart, definitely so, because science, even in the dark ages, the science they had, they thought that was the peak of science. At every time we're going to see ourselves at the peak of science because we have this arrogance. Scientists tell you that humans 1 million years ago, they looked such and such. How did they know? It's all speculation. But they talk about this with confidence as if this is the well-established fact. And they could actually have some findings to abrogate this. Okay, questions? Yes, attended to. Okay, good. Question and answer session. Go ahead. Yes. إنك إن تذرهم يضلوا عبادك ولا يلدوا إلا فاجرا كفارا. Yes. Yes. No, children will be born upon Islam, but they would send their children astray, which is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Each child is born upon fitrah, but it's his parents that change him into Christianity, Judaism, whatever it is. So each human being is born on fitrah, but it's the upbringing that changes. Another load. I could read this. Okay. The sisters' questions are loaded, so I'll read them first, then I will read them loud. Okay, is it permissible to charge people for much money for Islamic knowledge? To me, that's not an Islamic issue, to be honest. Anyone knows how Ibn Taymiyyah made his living? No, Ibn Taymiyyah. That's Sheikh Al-Albani. Sheikh Al-Albani was making much. It's good. What? No. What was the profession? How did he make a living? Ibn Taymiyyah. No. Actually, it wasn't. Yes. No, actually, writing was not a profession because it didn't bring any profit, by the way. It's only the transcribers who could make money. They could take the book, transcribe it, make copies and sell the copies. But the writer was poor. Well, the poor guy had nothing to take. Was? Ibn al-Qayyim was the doctor. Ibn Taymiyyah had some knowledge, but do you know what the profession of Ibn Taymiyyah was? He used to teach in Al-Madrasa Al-Hanbaliyya. Teach fiqh, aqidah. This is how he made a living. Okay? So the basic premise about, or the basic principle about a person teaching Islamic science, and they say that's the deen of Allah, how do you charge money for that, is not true. That's not true. You can teach Islamic sciences and make profit, as long as it's reasonable. Now what is reasonable? Because the sister here is asking about much money. Now I can't set the parameters for that, but what I would say, in principle, it is permissible, because any person who's going to teach, especially in today's world, you cannot make a person reach a high level of knowledge unless they do that for a profession, unless they have the full time to study. If they don't do full-time study, they won't reach a good level of knowledge. They won't reach a good level of knowledge. So they have the right to charge, but it has to be reasonable. How much is reasonable? Now, this is something I can't tell. It depends on the country, depends on the people's income, depends on their target audience, how they can afford, how they can't afford. So it's just difficult to decide on these issues. But I believe if you spread around advice, and I believe like the schools that teach Islamic studies and things like that, if someone is unable to pay, I heard that they arrange some kind of scholarship whether full scholarship or like some part of the tuition fees. Okay. What is the best way to avoid fitna of women? Is basically to avoid mixing with women. That's the best fitna. Or that's the best way. Ibn Taymiyyah has a beautiful statement, has a powerful statement. He says, if a person has a strong iman, if he sees a woman in the most attractive, image, it would not move his heart. Does it mean he loses his, natural desire? No. But his natural desire is placed in its right spot. So once he knows this is a woman, she's not halal for him, it's totally blocked out of his thought. So this is why it doesn't move anything in him. He doesn't feel anything towards her. You see, that's the beauty of faith, and this is how it does put our state, or our whole state in balance, inshallah. Okay, any questions before I go further? Okay, yes. So speak up, please, because I can't see you. Tawakkul, I can't talk about tawakkul, because tawakkul, if you ask me, because I expected someone to ask this question, is that we take an image of something or knowledge of something and leaves an impact on our hearts. And it gives rise to motivation or drive and then action. Why do we choose certain knowledge over certain knowledge? Why do we choose, certain knowledge over another? Like, why do we choose to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and move towards Him, rather than choose the dunya and move towards the dunya? Why? Okay. It's benefit, but yes. Ultimately it's benefit, but there is a way to describe it, but believe me, it could take us more than 6 hours to talk about this. And this is why, by the way, Allah says, we said the gist of the Quran is إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ. إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ explains a lot about إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ, but that's a totally different story. Okay. No, it's even deeper than reference point notion that I explained. It's right. This is right at the bottom. It's actually at the root. It's at the root of this. It even underlies this power. Don't pull my leg. Don't get me started on this. It's just, what I've said is complex enough. As I said, it's not complicated, it's complex enough, because most of the time we've taken some kind of, unfortunately, some obsolete, stagnant approach to understanding our deen. And that's the reason why our ummah lives in this state. If we consider the approach of the early generations to Islam, it was a totally different. And this is what we're trying to get to, or at least get close to. Basically, I'll give you the answer, okay? It could take 6 hours to explain, but ultimately humans chase for a state of resourcefulness. That's it. We do things for resourcefulness. How you define resourcefulness, each one is different, but there is a root, there's a bottom line for each of everything. For all of that, sorry. But I can't say more than that. I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. Sorry? Huh? I'm trying to answer the question, why do we choose a certain belief or certain way over another? Why do we choose different identity, one identity over the other? It's right at the bottom of our choices. We chase for resourcefulness. Absolutely. Chase for resourcefulness. This is why people do the things they do. This is why they worship the things they worship. This is why they make the decisions they make. We chase resourcefulness by nature. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to us Islam. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, when He wants to tell us to worship Him, He reminds us of the resourcefulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is al-rububiyyah. The fact He owns the world, He created everything, and He is capable of everything. I'm not going to say a word more than that. Okay. Tension. Okay, let's move on. What do we call this tension? We said we call it feelings, yes? Could be frustration, guilt, happiness. When does happiness occur? When there is tension. We have different types of tension. If the external world is better than your expectations, we feel happy. If they are similar, we feel satisfied. Does that go on? Huh? You'll have sadness, frustration. Reach happy. No, you can be happy. In paradise, this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet says, فِيهَا مَا لَا عَيْنٌ رَأَتْ وَلَا أُذُنٌ سَمِعَتْ وَلَا خَطَرَ عَلَى قَلْبِ الْبَشَرِ. In paradise, you're always surprised with what is available. So there's always something beyond your expectation. So it's a constant state of happiness. Okay, faith-based competencies. I just want to, first group, self-awareness. Obviously, these are studied in different disciplines. I took them in order to show what Islam has to say about these traits. Identity recognition. Okay, self-awareness. What do we mean by self-awareness in Islam? It's identity recognition. You know what definition you have for yourself, what identity you have for yourself, what is at the bottom of all your life, all your choices, all your actions, all your decisions. That's identity recognition. So you can trace back anything you do to what triggers it. What is the belief that triggers it? What do you want from that? You can, basically, if you manage to develop this clarity, you have self-awareness. You know when you fall in sin that there is a wrong definition in play at the moment that I have to deal with. So you stop dealing with the symptoms, you're actually dealing with the root cause. Instead of just, you see this temptation to women, you say, I can't resist it, I have this temptation to women. No, be sure that you have defined yourself somehow around the sexual desire. So you have to strengthen your love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, try to avoid, work on your inclination to this desire. So you know the root cause, and then you will be better equipped to handle it, inshallah. So identity recognition is very important, and you can also actually, it helps you plan for your own life. Because once you know your ultimate destination is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, once you know that you want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this will cause you to search within yourself what talents Allah has placed in you. Some people have a head for knowledge. Some people, they just don't have the ability to decipher and understand knowledge. They're very good at social work, let's say. Somebody is just a, medical genius. You can use that as a vehicle to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you get your identity settled, it's easy to set your priorities and your own uniqueness. You are better able to study yourself, what skills you have, what talents you have, and what strengths you have, and develop that. So it's not like you saw someone who's a scholar, but you are unable to reach that level of scholarship. You just don't have this head for knowledge. And you just keep saying, I want to be a scholar, I want to be a scholar, I want to be a scholar. That's lack of self-awareness. You're just trying to copy someone else. But if you have this identity recognition and understanding of the purpose behind your creation, you have the flexibility to study yourself. You have the luxury and the security, internal security, to study yourself objectively and spot your strengths, spot your weaknesses, and see how your strengths can help you make it or fulfill your ultimate goal. And this is how you choose your course of life. So you maintain your uniqueness and originality of character. You don't have to be a copycat. Okay, that's part of self-awareness, which emanates from identity recognition. Yes.
But I want to ask you to elaborate on the issue of self-esteem connected to self-identity, because we have many times in our community, among people, even some of the adults, they have identity crisis, where the people, they don't want to be identifying themselves as Muslim. That's a last one.
Jazakallah khair.
Again, we find it also sometimes with the sisters, they're not interested. Outside of the masjid, or maybe in the home, identifying themselves as Muslim.
Yeah.
There's this identity crisis that takes place because of the low or lacking self-esteem that we should have as Muslims. But we're not recognizing the blessings we have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair. The problem is that I believe I spoke right at the beginning so much about identity, but I will just give one comment on this. Which is, Jazakallah khair, yes, many of our youth are going through identity crisis, males and females. And there's something about identity, it's not a title, as we explained. You can call yourself Muslim and say my identity is Muslim, but it's not what you claim to be. It is what underlies your actions and your character. That's your real identity. What is actually functioning in your life, that's your real identity. So many of the Muslims today, they have belief in Allah, but it is stagnant. It is somehow kept in a closet. It's not functioning. It's not giving motivation. They keep it to the side and they're focused on what? Most people tend to identify at an early age, define themselves around their needs. A child defines himself around the needs. Food, mother's love, attention by parents and love by parents. Food and play and all that stuff. And Allah made it that way because we need to develop our physical abilities. Until we reach maturity, we're somehow equipped with what we need. Then we are ready to pursue our ultimate goal, which is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these actually play an important role, these physical needs. The problem is that then after that, it grows into an intellectual kind of identity, which we tend now to observe our actions and how the other people think about us. It becomes more social. Some people grow to a higher state, and this is what they call actually motivation. They call basic motivation, higher motivation, which is basically social one, about what other people think about you. But in Islam, this is not, by the way, high motivation. This is somehow between low and intermediate motivation. And then they have something called intellectual motivation, which obviously it's part of intrinsic motivation. It's basically you find so much pleasure in intellectual process that it gives you pleasure, keeps you going, and gives you the motivation. Okay? And motivation has a lot to do with identity. Now what I said about identity, and the problem is that once you have this motivation to be dominant, it defines who you are. Now you have your identity about how other people think about you. That's your basic motivation. If people think bad about you, your self-esteem is thrown out of the window. If people think good of you, you become arrogant. But we said with defining oneself, it is the basis of self-esteem. Once you define yourself around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one can get into this. Your relationship with Allah is private between you and Him. That doesn't mean you don't apply Islam, but what I mean is that no one can get between you and Allah unless you allow them into that. And once you manage to build your identity on this, no one can affect your self-esteem. Whatever they tell you, whatever they do to you, even physically, you have disengaged from anything else apart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's ihsan. And the Prophet talks about ihsan. That nothing actually affects your decisions, your thoughts, your actions, except your awareness of Allah. That's it. If this is intact, let the whole world be destroyed. It doesn't make any difference to you. You are intact. It becomes your identity. It takes a longer, but I spoke about it, elaborated on that today. Let me take some of the questions from the sisters. وياك. Okay, the issue about people who don't pray consistently, that's an issue of disagreement among the scholars. So I don't wish to enter it. Some scholars consider the person who leaves the prayer deliberately, but still believes. Like out of laziness, he believes. He leaves the prayer, but he believes it's obligation. Some scholars consider him to get out of the realm of Islam. Some people say, the majority actually of the scholars say, no, he remains a Muslim. But, which is a fair number of scholars as well say that, but they are a minority, that they say that he becomes kafir. Okay? I personally go with the opinion of the majority, that a person who leaves prayer out of laziness, like he misses a few prayers here and there, is still Muslim, but that's a grave sin, a severe sin, and it could lead him to disbelief, easily could lead him to disbelief. Okay. Okay, basically with identity, it's the purpose of existence, as we explained, the source of self-esteem. It is called direction as well, because once you define yourself, you have defined your direction. It gives you a sense of direction, and that gives you momentum. And then it's the basis of all behavior and the reference point for understanding the world. So we define things in the world based on how we define ourselves. It only means to a life of value. That's true. A correct and definition that is based on the Islamic principles is the only means to a life of value. You could be a non-Muslim, have very successful life, achieve very great material success, but end up in the hellfire. What's the point? Where is your intelligence? Because we said our lifespan is not only 60, 70 years. It's far greater than that. Allah promised us to live forever, either in paradise or hell. So that's life. That's only one stage of our lives. So why live within this blockade of this short life? Life is far greater than that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَإِنَّ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ. You think this is life? The true life is the akhirah. The true life is the akhirah. So this is only a tiny test. So we should, once you think about your lifespan, don't ever look at birth and death. Don't. These are just tiny marks on your highway, on the long lifespan that you have. Your time horizon extends far greater than that. And this gives you insight, immunity against trials, against sadness and depression. And this time horizon actually reminds you of your ultimate goal. That no matter what happens here, as long as you secure your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will get paradise, ultimate happiness, eternal happiness. So nothing to worry about. If you lose a little bit here, still fine. Okay, the fruits of self-awareness, a solid sense of identity. You know who you are. So once you say Muslim, you know what this stands for. Rather than you say Muslim and you hang around with girlfriends. Obviously there's something wrong there. You say, I'm Muslim and you're a drug dealer. There's a serious problem with your identity. You're just taking the title and stripping it from its reality. Okay, accurate self-assessment. Because once you define yourself, you'll have hit the bottom of your character, the root of your character. So actually you know everything follows from that and how it follows from that. So you can still control yourself. You can still choose the course of action you should be pursuing. So it is so powerful that it does help you. Self-assessment, accurate self-assessment includes discovering one's potential and natural talents. This is something I spoke about. Once you know that your direction is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it gives you a sense of security that no one can get into that. So you are within a fortress that no one can break into. So your self-identity, your self-esteem is intact. No one can touch that, no one can tamper with that. And this gives you the security and luxury to assess yourself with so much logic, objectivity, and reasonability. So basically, you have the luxury to really find the potential within yourself and choose the right course of action where you reach maximum potential. Ability to create a successful strategy for one's life. Because once you know your final destination, you know where you're trying to get, okay? It's easy to choose a way to follow. But if you don't know where you're heading to, like the famous statement in English, if you don't know where you're going, every road takes you there. If you don't know where you're heading, any road takes you there. Because you don't know where you're heading. And human beings cannot live successfully without the pull of a vision, without the pull of an ultimate destination that has the appeal that pulls you throughout your life, gives you that drive, that motivation to keep going and for achievement. Okay, so this is about self-strategy. Second group of higher state of being. Okay, I'll just go through them quickly, and I apologize, I won't be able to explain them in detail. Higher state of being. Islam and this kind of faith-based intelligence guarantees us a higher state of life standards in all respects. You're asking about material? Yes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَوْ أَنَّ أَهْلَ الْقُرَى آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَرَكَاتٍ مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. If the inhabitants of the land, of the cities, of the towns, if they believed, we would have showered them with blessings from the heavens and the earth. And I mentioned the historical fact that during the Khilafah of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, a wheat grain was equal in size to the seed or to the stone of a date. As big as this. That's a wheat grain. That's a blessing from Allah. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Rum, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادُ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِي النَّاسِ. You think our sins don't have an impact on the natural world? They do. Allah says in Surah Al-Rum, corruption, destruction, lack of blessings has spread in the earth and on the earth and in the sea because of the actions of human beings. So don't think that we are separate from the momentum that is functioning and running through the whole universe. Because the whole universe is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are the only ones who have the choice. Okay, how does Islam or this faith-based intelligence guarantee us a higher state of being? Self-control. We can develop self-control, acting out of strategy rather than impulse. Once you know your final destination, once you are facing a decision, you have the tools to evaluate it or to assess it right. Because if you don't know where you're heading, you're confused. You don't have any parameters to judge whether this is the right step or not. But if you know your final destination, you actually can tell whether this would help me or hinder me, bring me closer to my goal or push me away from it. So it gives you that self-control, so you have this strategy, you don't act based on impulse. Even if, like for example, you're faced with a demanding or urgent situation. Okay, most people, that's their problem, they react. So this is why they are burnt out. But when you have a strategy, you have this natural readiness to handle things right. You have this natural readiness because with strategy, you have direction. With strategy, you know that it's a multi-stage process. But if you act on impulse, you always want immediate results. But with strategy, you know that you can maneuver. Even if one stage pushes you back, the following stage will give you multiple, progress. So strategy gives you room to maneuver. And you cannot build that strategy without having an ultimate goal. Okay, trustworthiness, stability in choices and behavior. People can count on you. Because once you have a stable identity, your actions, your choices, your decisions, your mannerism is stable and authentic and original. It doesn't fluctuate based on the external world. So this is what gives Muslims trustworthiness. And this is a rare commodity today. Very rare commodity. Most people are pragmatic in a negative sense. The pragmatism of the Muslim is to please Allah. So it goes beyond physical needs, goes beyond financial achievements, goes beyond any temporary temptation. So this is why when you deal with a true believer, you will be safe. You'll be safe. Because you know that their pragmatism means that they give you your rights and even more. That's faith-based intelligence. Okay. Conscientiousness. I always had a problem with pronouncing this word. Taking responsibility for personal actions and consequences. Because you know where your actions come from. So you can trace them back to their origins, and you know that you have control over your choice of identity. So you know that whatever you do, you're responsible for it. There's a root for it in your heart. And you have control over your heart. That's the choice Allah gave us. So you're responsible for your actions. Many times people say, I don't know, I just have this love, as we said, for zina. You don't just have this love for zina. You brought it to yourself. You brought it to you. What was that? Because I hear that, often. I just can't control myself. You choose not to control yourself. Yes.
We've also known that we come across a situation where young people, not just anybody, comes in a situation where they're so down, they're so depressed, they're so against themselves, that there's this emptiness inside them. And this emptiness, they can't find a way to fill it with the good. So therefore, filling it with the bad is sufficient for them to be able to do something.
Definitely.
Rather than they just keep the emptiness there because it's so devastating.
Yes.
And this is what they have to overcome.
No.
By the time they fill it with so much bad, then they're feeling like depressed again because they're feeling so much sin.
Subhanallah.
And this is a big thing because we find it too many times in the jail and the drug rehab, the shelter. We find people like that, they're just going like that. Their emptiness is overwhelming and they can't really come down to a sense of conscientiousness.
MashaAllah.
To be able to correct themselves quickly and to be able to perform what's needed in terms of the purification.
MashaAllah, that's very revealing. Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair. MashaAllah. Thank you for sharing that. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. You see, actually experience teaches you a lot. And as I said, when the brother asked about trials, trials, they put you to the test and they help you exercise your faith and your belief and enhance it even more because you see it in action. So Jazakallah khairankum. MashaAllah, I appreciate this experience. Okay, adaptability, which I referred to before, some sort of flexibility, handling priorities well, which is total servitude. This is a statement by Ibn al-Qayyim. Many people, because they haven't developed a good understanding of their faith, of Iman, and how it forms their behavior and their actions and their motivation and all that, they get stuck with one act of worship and they cannot do anything else. They cannot do anything else. Let's say, for example, someone is coming to the masjid. He wants to catch up with the congregational prayer. He sees someone dying on the street or asking for help in a desperate situation. He says, no, I'm a Muslim, I need to get to the prayer. He goes to the prayer and forgets about this man. That's a poor choice. That's a poor choice. That's lack of flexibility. Listen to Imam Al-Qayyim. Now, many people, some beginner students of knowledge, they keep themselves from everybody else. They shun everybody else. And they keep themselves to their books. And even when they develop the knowledge, people come to them and they want to ask them. They are in a desperate situation. They need some help. Please give me guidance. You have the knowledge, give me guidance. He says, I don't have time, I need to do my studies. What's the point? So they are under the impression that the best thing you do, there is no one best thing you do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all times. There's nothing like that. There's flexibility. This is why Ibn al-Qayyim says, العبودية المطلقة. He says, ultimate servitude, ultimate obedience, dedication to Allah means that you do at every time the kind of worship that is dearest to Allah at this specific time. There's a famous word Ibn al-Qayyim uses so much. He calls wajibul waqt, the obligation of the present time. So he says, the best time when you have, or the best thing to do when you have free time is to study and learn the deen and get closer to Allah through that. The best time you do when it's time for the prayer, or the best thing you do when it's time for the prayer is to go and pray. The best thing to do, even if you are studying and you receive guests, the best thing to do is to entertain your guests. You see? Now we're talking about studying, which is a wonderful, a great act of worship. If you have guests, it is dearer to Allah, it's the dearest to Allah that you entertain your guests and you leave your studies. As you're coming to the masjid, you see someone who needs help in desperate situation, and you come to the masjid, you're trying to catch up with the prayer, with the imam, and you say, no, I just want to please Allah. You please Allah by helping that person and leaving the prayer at that moment. It's that kind of flexibility. Muslims today are stuck in some kind of rigidness when it comes to practicing Islam. Okay? So they say, somebody comes from, say, from an Arab country, they want to keep the same pattern, the same priorities, the same behavior, even here. But they don't realize it doesn't work like that. This country, or any other country, they have their own specific requirements. They have their own conditions. For example, someone, like his priority was spending his time studying, just learning. He comes to this country and he finds people are in desperate need for Islamic guidance. It's totally wrong to keep himself to his studies and not give his guidance to the people. Now it's time to share with people the knowledge you have got. So don't say, no, in my country, I spend my time studying, I'll keep the same routine. In your country, you had so many scholars giving people enough guidance. Now, here, people need your guidance. They need your advice. So it's dearer to Allah to spend the time guiding people rather than spending all of your time studying. So it's that flexibility. And that is the same flexibility that caused the Prophet ﷺ, when I talked yesterday about Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, that the Prophet ﷺ consented to a condition that entailed that anyone who comes from Mecca, any kafir who embraces Islam and comes from Mecca without the permission of his guardian or the one who is in charge of him, like his father, okay, or his master, anyone who comes from Mecca and he wants to become a Muslim and he comes to the Prophet ﷺ as a Muslim, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has to catch him and give him to Quraysh. That's a Muslim, you give him back to Quraysh to torture him? Somebody could have this objection. Why did the Prophet ﷺ do that? Flexibility. Did he compromise principles? No, not at all. But the Prophet ﷺ kept his principles. He knew his direction, but he calculated things right. And he found some wiggle room in order to have this flexibility. He realized that this condition is ultimately going to be best for Muslims. And even at that stage, as they were signing it, I said that the son of the Quraysh negotiator or delegate, Suhail ibn Amr, his son had embraced Islam and he was torturing him. He managed to free himself and he came at that spot, and his father said, as he was signing, he said, and this is the first case under this article. He's the first one to come back. The companion said, "Oh Messenger of Allah, he's just come as a Muslim. How can we send him?" He said, "Send him back. That's our word. We have to keep our word." Was the Prophet ﷺ acting against Islam or against Muslims? No. You know, if someone does something like that today, you kafir, you're an agent, and so on and so on. All these, we have to be patient. We have to understand, sometimes we look at the surface, we look at the superficial stuff, but we don't realize the underlying dynamics about that, which are the most important. The same thing applies to Umar ibn Khattab. During Am al-Ramada, the year of famine, when he put on hold the punishment for theft, because he realized that if we apply it in this stage, it goes against the maqasid of Sharia, against the objectives of Sharia. But it's not for anyone to choose. Because now it's become a trend today among some of the younger da'iyah. They say it's maqasid al-Sharia. They make music halal. They make mixing with women halal. They make riba halal, mortgage halal. It's why maqasid al-Sharia. That becomes a devil religion, man-made religion, rather than Islam. It's the well-versed scholars after enough and ample, discussion and consultation. It's a very serious matter. So Umar ibn Khattab put it on hold. Why? Because he knew after consultation with the companions that this actually does not serve the maqasid of Sharia here. So did he go against Islam or against Sharia? No. He was actually implementing Islam. That's at that spot, and at that time, and under these conditions, it was the real spirit of Islam to put that punishment on hold. That's flexibility that faith-based intelligence gives us. Okay, innovation and originality, and as I explained this when I said when you develop your own identity, you have the luxury and the security, you can afford to be yourself, to take the risk of finding out who you are, what talents Allah has put in you, and digging a new way, even for other people to follow you. So Islam gives you all of this, and I have to conclude. Jazakumullah khair for your patience and your listening, and Jazakumullah khair for your wonderful questions, mashallah. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.